Okay, so after 2 pre-release events, I ended up with a few creatures that I could build decks around. The first and least exciting for me is Kethek, Crucible, Goliath. On the first day, it was my stamped promo, and I got a second oil slick copy in those packs as well, which is unfortunate because they're absolutely awful in the limited format. However, when we can build around it as a commander, it becomes a little more interesting. Kethek Crucible Goliath is a 4/4 legendary Phyrexian beast for 2 black-red. It says at the beginning of your end step you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-legendary creature card with lesser mana value. Put it onto the battlefield, then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Since we're sacrificing our own creatures to get another creature onto the field from the library, Dies triggers and ETB triggers will be where we can focus our creatures to get the most value out of our cards. Decent dying triggers here would be like Jury, Master of the Review, since we'll be sacrificing a lot of creatures anyway. It's a 1/1 for red and a black that says whenever you sacrifice a permanent, put a 1/1 counter on Jury. When it dies, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. We can include creatures like Impulsive Pilfer, Piteous Plunder, and Atsushi the Blazing Sky for the treasure they can generate to help pay for your shenanigans, along with Pawn of Ulamog for some Eldrazi spawn that can be sacrificed for colorless mana. Midnight Reaper, Dark Prophecy, Grim Harrowspix, and Erebos Bleak-Hearted will give you card draw when a creature dies, which will be really important since you'll be throwing a lot of your creatures into the graveyard. If we lean into Aristocrats, we can use the standard package of Zulaport Cutthroat, Blood Artist, Elisil Core, Cruel Celebrant, along with your favorite sack outlets to get some extra damage in, and allowing you to sacrifice creatures at any time rather than just once at the end of the turn. Then, since we're sacrificing creatures pretty often, we can dip into reanimation to get some of them back and recycle them for more value. And since we're talking about value, if you like what you see here, why don't you hit that like button and sub to the channel? I'm really enjoying talking about commander decks like this, and if you enjoy listening, you may as well not miss any other videos like these in the future, right? Thanks. Victimize will get 2 creatures to the battlefield for the low price of 3 mana and a creature, while Stitched Together can get a creature back to your hand or back to the battlefield if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard. Animate Dead is a classic and will get 1 creature from any graveyard. Gixian Puppeteer could give you a 2-for-1 deal. It says when you draw your second card each turn, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. This might happen depending on what cards you have, but the next line is what we're talking about. When it dies, return another target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So if you sack this to Kethek and get a random creature with mana value 3 or less, and then get a target creature back from the graveyard with mana value 3 or less, which is a great 2-for-1 deal. Treasure Keeper is an artifact creature that does something similar. When it dies, you reveal cards until you hit a non-land card with mana value 3 or less, and you can cast it without paying its mana cost. It's not a terrible deal if you need your sack outlets, pingers, or some other shenanigans you have in your deck. Vindictive Lich will make each of your opponents do one of 3 things: sack a creature, discard 2 cards, or lose 5 life. If you need your low-cost creatures out, Endless Cockroaches will get them pretty reliably since it'll go back to your hand when you sacrifice it. It might take a little more planning or tweaking on the creatures you include, but utilizing Phoenix creatures would be an interesting way to get more mana-expensive creatures out of your deck while getting it back after fulfilling some requirements. Nemesis Phoenix costs 5 mana and will return to the battlefield only during the Declare Attacker's step for 3 mana. It stays on the field, so for 3 mana you could get a 4 mana creature onto the battlefield. Rekindling Phoenix costs 4 mana and will leave an elemental behind when it dies. Then at your upkeep you can sack it and Rekindling Phoenix goes back to the battlefield. Some worthwhile ETBs for the decks would be from Solemn Simulacrum for the land, and you can sack it that turn for a card. Combustible Gearhulk will let your opponents choose whether you draw or take a random amount of damage. Creatures like Cadaver Imp and Gravesifter will let you get a creature back to your hand. Then Fleshbag Marauder and Gravelighter will make everyone sacrifice a creature, which isn't a problem for us since we have a bit of reanimation available. Hoarding Dragon might be a good include if you want to tutor for a specific artifact. It says when it enters the battlefield, you search for an artifact and exile it. When the dragon dies, you can put the artifact into your hand. It's not efficient in the slightest, but I'm not aware of any other artifact tutors in the Rakdos colors. But it might be worth it in Kethek since you get your artifact and a random creature onto the battlefield. So since we actually want to end the game and not just spin the wheels of our deck forever, we'd want a few ways to actually win the match. If you can control the board with enough of your effects, you'll have some decent creatures on the field to just swing into your opponents. But aside from simple combat, if you want to use cards like Active Treason to take control of your opponent's creatures to sack to Kethic, you can also use that strategy to attack and finish a game. Captivating Crew is a creature that can do this for 4 mana, so it might be worth an include if you want to lean into this strategy. And in this strategy, I'm a big fan of Mob Rule, since your opponents will be building their boards while you're doing all of your shenanigans anyway. It's a sorcery for 6 that says choose 1. Gain control of all creatures with power 4 or greater until end of turn, untap them and they gain haste, or gain control of all creatures with power 3 or less until end of turn, untap them and they gain haste. Take control of the entire board and finish the match. Other than that, between Aristocrat, draining effects, and combat with beefy creatures, winning the match shouldn't be too difficult. There are a few ways to go with Kethic, and now that I've worked out a few strategies for the commander, it looks more interesting than it did when I first started this, so we could throw in more support for whatever strategy we want to roll with and then see how we like the deck. I'll probably roll in with the Phoenix idea since I have a lot of those available after trying to build Cyrex. And that's about it. Let me know what you think of this video in the comments below and what direction you might take Kethek, Crucible, Goliath if you decide to build it. Like the video if you liked the video, dislike it if you disliked it, and until next time, I'm Space Coconut, and you're welcome.